Moving on in the agenda, we've got kind of a round of speakers. First up is Robert Rowley, Emergency Manager for Coconino County. Is going to walk us through the Coconino County 2013 Communications Focused Tabletop Exercise.
All right, tucked away over here in the corner. This makes it a lot harder for me to read entirely off of the PowerPoint presentation for the entire afternoon. But I will do my best to bore you anyway. I hope it's not that boring. Yes, good afternoon. My name's Robert Rowley. I'm the Coconino County Emergency Manager. And last February, we had a interoperable communications tabletop exercise that we all felt went very well. All right. So just a little bit of the background information. The Office of Emergency Communications got a grant from the Technical Assistance Program. That all spilled into the Public Safety Interoperable Communications Office approaching us saying they had funding to help us put on a tabletop exercise to exercise our TICP, which I jumped at that opportunity because we generally all have the technology to speak with each other on the radio. Very rarely do we actually exercise that ability to do it. We have some unique challenges up here in Coconino County. We have the city flag staff on UHF, all our surrounding agencies on VHF, NAU, which also is on UHF, and we all help each other out up here, and sometimes it can get a little tricky trying to make sure we're still able to talk to each other. So they assigned a team to help us put on the exercise. It was really good. All we really had to do here at the county level was provide logistical support. They helped us put all the meetings together. They helped us actually craft and put the exercise on and go through the after-action review process. The first conference we had was called the pre-planning conference, and as you see, when we go down the line here, they followed the Homeland Security exercise and evaluation process pretty much to the letter. There are some people who hate HCEP. There's those who like it. I started out hating it and grew to like it because it forces you to put on a very well organized and documented exercise with good documentation at the end in your after-action review and corrective action plan. So you're going to kind of see how the HC process works as we go through the slides. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to take it. So the first pre-planning conference was held, and this is when we set up the entire HC planning process to put on the exercise. And you can see it goes all the way from, all right. It goes all the way from your first planning conference all the way to the after-action conference at the end. So what we figured out was we wanted to test our overall readiness of the region in the event of an actual emergency and actually using our TICP. This all flows around the whole NECP goal to that 75% of first responder agencies in non-UASI areas are supposed to be able to get their communications, get interoperable communications up and running after a significant event within an hour, 3 hours. I have it here, but 1 or 3 anyway. So we wanted to review our policies, procedures, plans, assets for our communications that will be required by the exercise participants. We wanted to exercise our regional communications plans, in particular our TICP, discuss the ability of participating public safety personnel to rapidly establish interoperable communications in the events of a major multi-agency incident, and determine the capability gaps. Now, that's the biggest one at the end. We're less interested on what we do well, we're more interested on what we can't do well. And that's what we need to focus our exercise and training dollars on and equipment dollars on in the future. We had great participation from the beginning to the end. We'll go down at the very end of this presentation to show all that were involved. But we had basically every major emergency response agency and supporting agencies participating in this process. even from the planning all the way up to actually putting on the exercise. So at the initial planning conference, we did the overview of how a tabletop exercise is supposed to work using the AZPSIC process. And we did a discussion of the tabletop. We kind of went over what we thought some of our potential communication gaps would be. We wanted to figure out who was going to be part of this exercise. We needed to make sure all the major players were there. We wanted to pick a scenario that would involve everybody. And you'll see our scenario here upcoming. It gets pretty complex. And then who from these agencies need to be participating. And that's probably the toughest part right there, because oftentimes you see the same people showing up to all of these exercises. And a lot of them are the mid to upper level management command folks. And what we really want, especially at an interoperable communications exercise, we want the people participating in the exercise is actually going to be picking up the radio and actually be trying to do the tactical operations out of the field. And that's tough because you're pulling people off the job and into an exercise. So we had to do a little arm twisting, but we really did get good participation from them. Only planners, oh, I'm kind of skipping stuff. So that was the initial planning conference. The final planning conference, only the actual planners of the exercise attend. You don't want people who are going to be exercise participants here because they get to see what's going to happen. I kind of want them to be surprised a little bit. So we reviewed our final scenario. We made sure as many of the agencies we felt needed to participate were engaged in the process, finalized any of our unresolved details, verified all of our dates for the actual tabletop exercise and the AAR. And then we wanted to know who needs to receive the tabletop exercise after action report. AARs can often have some somewhat sensitive information in there, especially if the participants are frank and open as to what they saw and found out during the exercise, which you want them to be. So you don't just want to send your AAR out to the world. It needs to just go to the people who need to see it. Finalize which players we wanted to have attend the tabletop exercise, and then went over the logistics. It's amazing how much goes into a well thought out and well planned tabletop exercise. A lot of times these things are just kind of thrown together, and the overall end result usually reflects that. You know, yeah, you got everybody together, yeah, you had your exercise, but does anybody remember it 3 months down the road, and were you able to formulate a plan on how to move forward after that? So here we are, the day of the tabletop exercise. We have a few kind of pictures of it as we go along. We had 69 players, observers, and evaluators participating in this tabletop. It was a big one. It filled up our entire emergency operations center, the main conference room over at the Sheriff's Department. Everybody who was playing or observing got situation manuals. Anybody here ever put together a sit-man before? A few? Everybody still awake? All right, a couple. You know what's neat about HC is when you actually enter your exercise into the system, it's an online portal that you get into. It's got all the boilerplate for all of these documents. So all you're really doing is going in and just kind of tweaking it to make it work for your exercise. It does a lot of the work for you. That's what I like about it. What we did is all the participants were positioned in the room. It's hard to see because there's so many people in there, but we kind of created little table islands throughout the room where they were separated by their roles and agencies. And then the observers were all around the edge of the room. And the evaluators were kind of spread throughout the room, listening in, trying to be invisible, but trying to hear what the interaction was going on during the exercise. And then we had a facilitator up front who was running the meeting. And here's some of your typical positions that you have in a good exercise. You have your players, the people you're testing. You have your observers. A lot of people get interested when they hear you're putting on an exercise, so they just want to come in and take a look at it. The evaluators are the ones who are actually watching the exercise and writing down notes and giving all of the feedback at the end to help with the after-action review. And the facilitator keeps the exercise moving along. So here we are getting kicked off in the exercise. The facilitator began, I just forgot her name. Jennifer Harden, yes, Jennifer Harden. She was great, a really good facilitator, kept everybody really engaged. And that's the other thing. A good facilitator, which she was, looks around the room and sees who's not participating, and then kind of focuses in on them to make sure that they actually give input. Because everybody we had in that room needed to be there, and we needed to hear from them. So, at the initial planning conference, can anybody guess what agency didn't make it to that one? They were at all the rest after that, but we looked around and said, who's not here? All right, let's have this happen on NAU. So what we're going to do is kind of run through the whole scenario we put together, and it'll kind of give you an idea of how we crafted this scenario to try to bring all of the participants in, and so they'd all have a role. That's a difficult thing to do in Coconino County. You know, we're a little on the large side, so to create a incident that was large enough, to bring in the city of Williams and Sedona and a lot of our surrounding agencies, it took some creativity, but I think we did pretty good. So here's our scenario. It starts on the campus of NAU. Students are preparing for their finals, and a series of demonstrations have occurred with a protest group, and it's been all scheduled. We've been able to watch it kind of unfold on Facebook. And then the scenario is set up in phases, and at the end of each phase, we stop and we discussed how this would affect how we'd respond, how this would affect our communications as each phase goes through. So, phase one, we have 911 callers report there is an explosion in a building in the NAU campus. There's windows blown out, possible laboratory and office spaces damaged. Callers reporting an unknown number of injuries. And that's basically all they got, and then we stopped and said, all right, what are some of our communication challenges based solely on this? And based on phase one, no real challenges yet, right? We just got the initial information. Phase two, response. The first responders arrive on scene and report 2 fatalities and approximately 6 injured. Witnesses report at least 9 students unaccounted for. So now we're getting a little more complex. We have essentially an MCI, 6 injured all at once, 2 fatalities would put a pretty big strain on our fire and EMS. And obviously we're going to have a urban search and rescue situation here possibly if we have 9 students, we don't know where they're at in the damaged building. So after each phase we talked about it, and the facilitator keeps the discussion focused on communications. It's really easy. Those of us who have a first responder background, we really like to get into the weeds and talk about all the other stuff we're going to do. This was specifically an interoperable communications exercise, so when the responses started drifting away from communications, it was her job to bring everybody back in, keep it focused on communications. Really hard to do because we want to try to fix all the other stuff too. Potentially impacted agencies were engaged to ensure their participation. And again, that's where that facilitator looks around and sees who's not participating, whose opinion we've not gotten yet, and makes them talk. Phase 3, incident evaluation. Paramedics initiate on-site triage efforts and law enforcement establishes a perimeter. And officers report shots fired. Seconds later, responders report 2 officers down. Suddenly this whole thing is just ballooned up exponentially larger. It was already big, now it's gotten much, much bigger. So we stop, talk about how that's going to affect our communications. If anybody in law enforcement in this room has ever been in a situation, even around a situation where there's been an officer-involved shooting, we all know what happens to radio communications the second that happens. And that is, it's chaos on the radio. So how have we addressed that in our tactical interoperable communications plan when that happens? Phase 4. Main road in and out of NAU is shut down due to vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Traffic is backing up into town. If you're familiar with the campus of NAU, it's just part of the city of Flagstaff, basically. It's a little island in the middle of it, but it's like part of the city, and its ingress and egress out of there is pretty tight. If you tried to get in there when classes start in the morning or at the end when everybody's trying to get home, even in regular good days, it's locked up. And imagine all this emergency traffic swarming in. You have the officer down call. You're going to have law enforcement coming from everywhere to try to help out. It's going to lock it out. How's that going to affect communications? Phase 5, local communications are severely degraded due to the amount of use by students and local citizens. NAU boasts a campus population of in the low 20,000s. Every one of them has a cell phone. Think they're going to be on it, talking to who they want to talk to about it, and texting and Facebooking and all that. We don't have a strong cell tower infrastructure up here. We really rely on cell phones way more than we should, and so we created this scenario so that cell phones are going to be taken out of the picture early on, so you're forced to utilize your ticket. Cell service is not working. Phase 6, secondary response and assessment. 911 callers report a vehicle leaving at a high rate of speed. Driver roughly matches the campus shooter. The driver loses control down the I-40 and clips a tour bus full of Japanese tourists, overturning it. The bus blocks eastbound I-40. The driver of the vehicle flees into the terrain from the scene. So now we're really blowing this thing up. But just, I'm against exercises that are needlessly large and complex and setting people up to fail, and that's not what we were doing here. We were just trying to find something that was going to be so resource heavy that we were going to need to bring in as many outside agencies as possible to really talk about how we're going to talk to each other. Phase 7, the county EOC and the NAU EOC are both activated to address additional resources that are needed for all incidents and scenes. And this is where I come in, and a really frustrating thing at the Emergency Operations Center level is trying to get that communication from the field into the EOC. It's always a challenge, even when things are not this bad. Phase 8, both dispatch centers are inundated with media requests. Keeping in mind, when they say both dispatch centers, we're talking about the Flagstaff PD Sheriff's Department Dispatch Center and the NAU Police Dispatch Center, which are both going to be intimately involved with this. Rumor is the Flagstaff and campus police chiefs already on campus for a meeting where the two officers critically wounded in the shooting. The explosion and ensuing response were captured on mobile devices and were immediately posted to multiple social media sites. Big public information problem right here. Phase 9, we talked about our mutual aid partners in this. You have a bus with 40 riders, 20 injured, 5 deceased. Who are you going to ask for mutual aid with that MCI? Local hospital is overwhelmed, so that brings up the how we're going to distribute patients. It's already overwhelmed. Where are we going to send those 20 injured? The driver remains at large and the search continues. All the law enforcement resources that are going to be coming in at this point to try to find that person. Highway is backed up. Rescue activities on campus. Additional public safety resources are required. State and federal agencies are engaging in the effort. And boy, bring in your federal law enforcement agencies, particularly out of the area. How do you talk to them? They're in an entirely different world. What's your plan for that? And finally, I think this is finally, Phase 10, intelligence and investigations. Public safety sensitive radio transmissions are being scanned. Incident commanders are looking for secure ways to communicate, keeping in mind that you can't use your cell phones now. We have a fellow up here who runs a website and Facebook page called Flag Scanner, and as the name would have you believe, he just listens to the scanner and then puts this information out. And he has apps that you can download to your smartphones, and you get alerts, and you can find out every little thing that's happening in the city of Flagstaff and surrounding area all throughout the day. And you're using your radios because you can't use your cell phones to talk about potentially sensitive matters in the law enforcement investigation, intelligence, and the manhunt out in the field. How are you going to do that if you can't use your cell phone? You don't want the public to know everything that's going on out there. Oh, I was wrong. Phase 11. I've been to a lot of exercises, particularly since I entered the field of emergency management. And I can't think of one single exercise I've been to where we have exercised the actual transfer of command. We all talk about setting it up and being ready to do it, and usually our exercise ends right at the point where we're ready to do it, but we never do. There's a lot of issues with that. It's really hard to let go. You've got everybody who's been involved in it. It's time for you to move on and turn it over to the next operation period. So in our next operational period, we're looking at the situation the next group is going to be dealing with, where evacuations are mostly complete from the crash site. Explosion victims have been transported to local hospitals. 4 students are still unaccounted for. The driver is still outstanding, and the search is continuing. Current rescue teams have worked through the night and need relief. Next operational period begins. Now, I believe there was a, just on the issue of still looking for the person out in the woods. In Northern California last year, they had a SWAT team that was out looking for a homicide suspect in the woods up in Northern California, and that hunt lasted for about 4 or 5 days. And yeah, imagine the logistics necessary and the planning necessary to pull out your resident local SWAT team and have an outside agency come in and take over that operation, and the communications that would be involved with that, because they might not have all the same channels that you have in your radio. There's all our phases. So when we finished, everybody's encouraged to stick around and take part in a hot wash. You've all heard of a hot wash. That's just it's like a really quick after-action review. Everybody stops, takes about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour to talk about everything that what went right, what went wrong, what could have been better about the exercise. We had really good feedback from all our participants. They liked the exercise. They actually thought that more people should have been participating in it. We already had 69 there total. We were at capacity for that room. They felt there could have been more agencies there to help. They wanted to do additional tabletops to ensure all agencies are fully engaged, in particular getting more of those line level folks in there participating in it. And they shared what their takeaways were from the exercise and what they were going to specifically try to follow up with at their home agency. We then had a quick look, which was the next day, and that gave our exercise team time to look at the evaluations that were completed that day by the evaluators, the comments that were given at the hot wash, and then kind of give a little more complete overview of how the exercise went as a quick look view. And the attendees were encouraged to provide feedback on the overview for the after-action report. A few days later, we got an electronic version of the AAR, just kind of the rough draft, so to speak. And then the whole idea is you look at the AAR, and everybody who shows up to the after-action conference is already familiar with it, and they're ready to provide feedback. Makes the meeting more efficient. After we were all done, some of our successes, we did have good multi-agency, multi-discipline participation in the exercise. That wasn't a surprise to me up here. This is my 1-year anniversary in Coconino County. I came from California. We thought we were pretty good at being cooperative and doing a lot of multi-agency stuff. It's a whole new level up here. It really is great. I never really have any issues. When I was trying to bring everybody together for this exercise, I had all of about 5 months on the job, 4 months on the job, and I didn't have much trouble at all getting people to participate. So I mean that is an example of the kind of group of people we're working with up here. Regional agency reps quickly recognized the benefits of operating in a unified command. That was good that they recognized that, because it doesn't happen very often. Command personnel identified the need to co-locate their command structures, in part to reduce the need for additional command level radio communications. You've got so many different agencies that all have a major role to play in this type of incident, the incident that we created here. If everybody's kind of located in the same command post on a unified command, then they're not using precious radio space to try to talk to each other. Here's the most important stuff. Here's some of the things we came up with that we could improve upon. Continue to collaborate as a region on implementing unified command. Develop our protocols to address dispatch center roles and responsibilities during significant events. What would NAU primarily be responsible for? What would Flagstaff, Coconino County Dispatch Center be primarily responsible for? What would fire be doing? This was an interesting one. It's designate a single cross-banded radio frequency talk path exclusively for direct communications among PSAPs in the Coconino County region. We identified we didn't really have that, and that it would be something that would have really benefited us in a situation like this. And then program regional radios in accordance with the Arizona Interoperable Channels Plan. Errors came up a lot during the exercise, and how much everyone was going to rely on that as one of the ways they're going to be able to talk to each other. But keeping in mind that's one channel that everybody was relying on. Our final after-action report was, this is it here. It was 89 pages. It was very complete. About 40 of those pages or so were specific items on our gaps and how we can address them. And that was provided to us, and we sent that out to all of our participating agencies to use and move forward with. You know, the trick now is to actually move forward with it. It was a great exercise. We learned a lot. We got a great comprehensive document. It tells us what we need to do. Now the hard part is actually do something with it, because as I was just kind of talking about it back at my seat, you have a project like this, you spend months planning it, you carry it out, you finish it, and then there's that pressure to move on to the next thing because you've already done this. But this is a constant thing. It's a constant issue that we have to deal with. Channels are always changing, names are always changing, systems are always being upgraded. This is something we need to stay on top of. And here is the list of our participating agencies that was all part of this. So that was a really good group to get all of that under one roof to participate in one single exercise. And again, the state really helped us out with that. All I had to do was kind of handle the logistics of herding the cats into the room, and then they put everything on for us and gave us the great document at the end. And yeah, thanks to me. And that's my partner, Ruth Ann, right there. She's my assistant. She really helped me out. I couldn't have done it without her.
This is my slide. They did a lot of work on this, and we really wanted to say thank you, because if it wasn't for their office, then this wouldn't have been so successful.
Any questions? Bored to tears? Ready to move on?
Excellent. It's good. Let's do. I commend you and the group for following through with the tabletop exercises. I mean, obviously that's one of those challenges. You know, you always want to be prepared. But looking at it from the communications aspect, and I know Coconino County had a Goal 2 evaluation through a lot of the areas that talks about communication and they'll link the channels and having the radios programmed. I'm wondering, and this is more for my peers here on the commission, is it something we should be doing to drive more of the public policy, the communications policy, and be able to help support? And maybe, again, I'm not quite in tune with what staff is doing. Obviously, they're here supporting the planning and reporting. But I'm wondering, because I see these similar type of items every presentation we have. It's the issue of different organizations resistant to moving over, or whether it's financial. So I'm looking at just kind of an open question: is how can the commission continue to push forward on pushing public policy and using that at the state level to help, you know, provide them with the resources they need and to be able to have more successes. So, like hats off to you on pulling out the exercise, but I think we need to be looking at some more public policy on pushing policy.
It's the follow-up. You know, so we had great exercise support. It was not that difficult for us to make this happen. The hard part now is, yeah, we have all these gaps. How are we going to provide the motivation to meet them, fill them?
So, Steve, I think that's a great point. I think just yesterday we received our letter to do a sunset review of the PSCC office, and so I think this is a really good time to kind of to look inward on what the role of the organization is, what has been accomplished over the last 5-10 years, right? But also what's next, because I know there's been some question of is it, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of potentially what this organization is about. I think there's some assumptions that it's to build the physical infrastructure versus to help coordinate that communication. And I don't know that the value of interoperable communication and facilitating conversation is valued sometimes, or even just understood at all. And so I love your guys' input as to how do we capture that, how do we make that part of the charter and the mandate as we move forward. because I think it is critical. I think there's kind of a crossroads where a lot of this infrastructure has been built out, things have evolved, technology's been invested in. I think sometimes, leadership sometimes thinks that, oh, we already gave a whole bunch of money. It's like a railroad track and it's not going to change for the next 50 years. Well, that's not what it is. I think there is a lot of nurturing that has to happen in order to continue to move this forward.
And I want to commend the staff, the PSCC staff. I mean, they're there. They travel all over the state to help, different exercises in counties in the state. I'm just trying to figure out how do we, when you look at the various communication systems throughout the state, and the overall goal is if we have to move some assets from the north down to the south, or central Arizona down to the south, or whatever the case may be, I'm wondering if that's one of those areas that we need to start focusing more on, and is creating that public policy, being the kind of the conduit, if you will, between the different communication systems to be able to have that common element, that resources they can go to and say, how do we get to where we need to be? Great example here, we know what we have to do when the time of effort comes in. We know we got to get bodies to the hospital, we got to get reports made. But that communication part of things, we're no different in the valley, because we don't exercise it as much as we need to, and even down to the point the officers getting to the various decks that they need to get to the channel. So I just think we should be looking at what we can do to help pull all this stuff together statewide.
Yep.
I guess with that, I'm out of here.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you.